Hello, my dear students, and welcome to the first YouTube upload of our fun reads. As you know, I'm going to be finishing Wild Rescuers either in this video or the next video. I haven't decided yet, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Chapter 16. We're going into hiding until this blows over. Stacy was back in the cave with Paige and the pack explaining the wolf bounty. I guess we've always been in hiding, she continued. But this time it's serious. Everything to the west of our cave is off limits, okay? It's too close to the village. Supposedly, there will be protected areas for campers, which hunters have to avoid. But the rest of the forest is open ground for them, and what they want is to find wolves. Stacy stood in front of the cave entrance with Everest and Basil looking down at a very glum Wink, Addison, Tucker, and Noah. Paige was napping in the back of the cave. "They want to kill you," Stacy said in a forceful tone. She hated speaking so harshly to the wolves, but the stakes were too high now. No one leaves the cave during the day. Do you understand me? Stacy's wolves were crepuscular, just like normal wolves in the wild, meaning they were mostly active at dusk and dawn. Stacy's pack had retained their body clocks to accommodate her sleep schedule, but now that the bounty was in full force, they'd have to change their behavior again. "We'll gather food at night, using the buddy system," Stacy continued. "Everest, your buddy is Tucker. Basil, you're with Addison. Wink and Noah, that means you guys are buddies. And Paige, you can be with me." The wolves stood up and got into their pairings. Stacy could tell that they were disappointed. This time of year in the Taiga usually meant long hikes to pick blackberries, endless games of tag and twilight, and water fights in the river. None of this was going to happen. "It's going to be a rough summer," Stacy warned them. "And one more thing," she added, looking in Paige's direction. "All rescue missions are suspended until farther notice." Over the next 2 weeks, Stacy and her pack of wolves stuck to Stacy's plan of staying in the cave during the day and foraging for food at night. It was strange for Stacy to sleep snuggled up with all 6 wolves, but she enjoyed not having to worry about them patrolling the ridge alone every night. The long days spent inside the cave were punctuated by the sounds of gunshots. Stacy flinched every time she had heard one and noted it in her daily diary entry. She had been spending all her free time, and she had a lot of it now, on a new wood crafting project, a beautiful wooden chest. She had sanded down some of the planks for the top of the chest when another gunshot rang out in the forest. "That's 7, she said solemnly, standing up to walk over to her desk. She had wondered how many of those bullets had hit their intended targets. As much as she hoped all of them missed, she knew that that wasn't statistically likely. Dusky's pack was being called, and there's nothing Stacy and her wolves could do about it. "I need some fresh air," Stacy announced to the others. She stood up from her desk and grabbed a book and her satchel and started towards the cave exit. She felt a long cry coming on, and she didn't want the wolves to see that. But Everett stopped her. "Don't worry, boy," Stacy said, stopping to give him a hug. She showed him the book in her hand. "I'm only going a little way out to forage for mushrooms. According to our cookbook, we can make a great omelet." Everett shook his head. "No one's going to shoot me," Stacy said reassuringly. "It's you they're looking for. Besides, I think I can talk my way out of any chance encounter with humans now that I practiced with Jack and Miriam." Before Everest could stop her again, Stacy pulled the back of the branch trapdoor they had moved from the farm to the cave when they had first went into hiding. Stacy was much more concerned with the hunters finding them than finding her pumpkin patch. So she had thought it best that the strongest member of the pack, Everest Noah, help her carry it from the farm to the cave and lean it upright against the cave opening. Once out, she shimmied past the basketball-sized boulders they had rolled up against the cave's entrance. "I'll be gone for an hour at most," she whispered back into the cave. It wasn't directly at any wolf in particular, but Stacy knew their hearing was good enough that all of them would hear her. "If I'm gone longer, do not come looking for me. I'm fine." Stacy walked south for a little while in the hot summer sun, occasionally glancing behind her to make sure none of her wolves were following, or had been foolish enough to follow her. Then she turned to the right and headed west in the direction of the village. She wasn't entirely sure what she was on the lookout for, but she wanted to see if she could spot any clues to what had been happening in her beloved Taiga while they had been in hiding. Warm tears started streaming down her cheeks while she walked, as she imagined Dusky's pack beginning to thin. No animal deserves to die because they were acting with their natural instincts. Why do humans think they are more deserving of a forest just because they have guns and can? Stacy's thoughts were interrupted by a bright yellow contraption she suddenly found herself face to face with. It had 3 legs and was probably about as tall as she was, and had the type of telescope mounted on the top of the tripod. But there was no telescope tube. Stacy had no idea what it was used for or who had left it here. She walked up to it and inspected it. "Sodoodle, 8600, property of county surveyor. Do not move." Stacy didn't understand what some of the words meant, but there was nothing else around that helped her piece together why this odd piece of equipment had been placed in the taiga. "Jim, I'm heading back to the East Point near the golf pro shop." Stacy whipped around to see a man in an orange vest. And here's the picture. Kind of looks like a camera. She found the man in the orange vest walking in her direction. Luckily, his head was turned away from Stacy as he called out to whoever Jim was, which gave her the second she needed to dart between the largest spruce trees she could find. What golf shop are they talking about? Stacy wondered from behind the trees as the man walked up to the tripod and looked into the telescope. Suddenly she understood. These men were working on a prosperous development, sizing up the taiga like it was already theirs. Stacy fought the sudden urge to run out from behind the tree and kick over the camera tool. She still had no idea what that was, but if it was being used to help plan a development, she'd lose no sleep if it were to accidentally break. Rather than stick around and get angrier, Stacy turned her heels and walked quickly back towards the cave. Her trip outside the cave had accomplished the opposite of what it was meant to do. Instead of finding the answers and allowing her to clear her mind and come to terms with what had been happening with the wild wolves, Stacy's brain was now cluttered with more confusion and hurt than ever. Even if the wolf bounty ends, now they had a new threat in their home to deal with. What if Miriam and Jack were unsuccessful in their fight against the development? What would happen to Stacy and her wolves now that the construction crews came to clear the forest? Would they have to leave the taiga forever? Where would they go? Everest was waiting by the door of the cave when Stacy got back. He jumped up, an obvious look of relief flashing across his face. "Told you I wouldn't be gone long," Stacy said, giving him a pat and settling down her bag. Everest sniffed the bag and then gave her a quizzical look. "Oh, Stacy started. "Yeah, I couldn't find any mushrooms. None that I thought were edible anyway. The rabbits must have eaten all the ones around here." It was the first time Stacy had ever lied to Everest, and she felt horrible about it. As everyone dug into their evening meal, Stacy looked around the cave and realized the morale of the group was at an all-time low. It means they were really sad. Everest was worried, probably because he could tell that Stacy was worried, even while she was trying to hide it. Noah was exhausted from having to fish every night to keep the group fed. He kept nodding off into his dinner bowl and then jerking his head up when it was dipped too low into his fish stew. Basil was getting stir-crazy, a result of not being able to run free as much as before. Tucker and Addison were heartbroken that they couldn't go on their rescue missions. Tucker was especially upset over the gunshots being heard. He was Stacy's most sensitive wolf, after all, so the idea of any animal being hunted affected him more than the others. And as for Wink, well, he was mostly just bored. To that end, Stacy decided to break a special book Addison had brought her a few months ago that Stacy had been saving for a stormy, drizzly day when they were trapped inside. There hadn't been any of those recently, though. In fact, it hadn't rained in weeks, which was unusual for a summer in the taiga. But rain or not, they definitely were stuck inside, so this was a good time as any for Stacy to start reading it aloud to the pack. The book was about a boy wizard at a magical school, and all the wolves seemed to enjoy it. Except for Noah, who had fallen asleep the minute they had curled up to read the book. Stacy had just gotten to the exciting chapter about a troll when she was interrupted by a flurry of bats that flew up from the back of the cave. She tried to ignore them, but they had formed a circle around Paige, her ears twitching wildly in the efforts to understand their signals. Suddenly, Paige was jumping at Stacy's feet, tugging her bootlaces towards the cave map. "I know it's after dark, but we're still not going to risk going out, Paige," Stacy said. A couple weeks ago, when one of the 7 gunshots had woken them up in the middle of the night, Stacy had realized evenings were not safe to go out as well. She had scaled back their nightly excursions to quick trips to and from the river so Noah could catch fish. Every other night, they went with all the wolves to create a defensive perimeter while Noah fished. But they had gone last night, so tonight it meant they were staying in the cave no matter what. Paige did not seem to care about these rules, however. She was pulling Stacy even more frantically. Humoring the little dog, Stacy made her way over to take a look at the map. She had no intentions of taking the wolves out of the cave on a rescue mission. For all she knew, the bats were telling Paige about a hunter closing in on one of the wild wolves. Paige could be unknowingly leading them directly towards harm's way, and that was a risk Stacy was unwilling to take. Her eyebrows raised, however, when she saw where Paige was pointing to on the map. "The forest of perpetual darkness?" Stacy asked, looking down at Paige, whose tail was wagging wildly back and forth. "The terrain is so wild there, it's not like the taiga. It's almost impossible to take 2 steps without having to climb or cut your way through the vines." "Hunters never enter. There's an animal that needs saving there?" Paige nodded vigorously. Stacy's contemptment. Let me repeat. Stacy oh goodness. Stacy thought about her opinions. An animal needed their help in that part of the forest that she knew the hunters would not be in. A part of the forest that she herself had not explored much, and that would give her restless wolves a chance to stretch their legs. Everyone, grab your packs, Stacy said loudly. We're going on a rescue. Now I know that was only one chapter, but it was a longer chapter. So I'm going to stop it there, and that'll be our reading for today. Thank you for joining me. Bye, guys.